Sports in the 21st century are driven by numbers, but it's the numbers that matter least to how good a player is that are often the most meaningful and remembered the longest. These are the numbers that fans pay good money every year to wear on their back, that teams hoist into the rafters of their stadiums, and that end up being as much a part of a player's identity as their own name. But who are the best players to wear each of these numbers? Well, from 99 to 0, that's just what we plan to find out. Now, the top 5 in these lists will be just limited to the 4 major North American sports, being hockey, basketball, football, and baseball, and will also be limited to just the pro level. But there will be some honorable mentions thrown out to athletes from other sports along the way. The lists will also be limited to just players who have spent a significant portion of their career wearing the number that the list is about. While the number 99 hasn't been one of the more commonly worn numbers throughout sports history, it has had its fair share of greats. But before we get to the top 5, there are a couple of honorable mentions. Although it is still early in his career, Aaron Judge has put up some impressive numbers, with 110 home runs in just under 3 years of play when you take into account his injuries. And although to this point he hasn't really put up enough to make the list, if he manages to stay healthy, he definitely could find his way onto this list in the future. Although he is a more established player, Aaron Donald still hasn't quite been around long enough to make this list. But with 5 Pro Bowl appearances, 4 All-Pros, and 11.5 sacks per year across his 6 seasons, he is well on his way to earning his way onto this list. In his 9 seasons, J.J. Watt has accrued 96 sacks, which is 3rd among active players and 41st all-time. But he is the only player in NFL history to have 20 or more sacks in 2 seasons in his career. But it isn't just quarterbacks that Watt has made a career out of terrorizing offensive backfields. His 158 career tackles for loss are 5th all-time since the stat was first recorded in 1999. In his 2011 rookie year, J.J. Watt helped the Houston Texans to their first ever franchise playoff berth. But it wasn't until 2012 when he started to really go off. In that year, his 81 total tackles, 39 of which were for loss, 20.5 sacks, and 16 pass defense were all career highs. And those 16 passes defended are the most in the single season by any D lineman since that stat was first recorded also in 1999. Watt continued to be one of, if not the best defensive player in the NFL through the 2014 season, a season where he became the first defensive player in 6 years to receive MVP votes. But his contributions in that season weren't just limited to the defense. He did also catch 3 touchdown passes during that season, one of which being the first touchdown pass ever thrown by Texans great Ryan Mallett. Unfortunately, starting the very next season, J.J. Watt would start to struggle with injuries, battling through a fractured hand and a couple of other injuries to record a league-leading 17.5 sacks in the 2015 season. Since the 2015 season, Watt has only managed to complete 16 games of just one other year and has suffered a number of season-ending injuries. But when he has been on the field, he has remained one of the NFL's best and is still very much a force to be reckoned with. And while it is not a contributing factor to where Watt is on this list, it is worth mentioning the significant impact he has had on the community since he has been in Houston. Watt has offered both his time and money to a number of charities in the Houston area since his time with the Texans, most notably raising $37 million for the victims of Hurricane Harvey. And though it's not the point of them, his efforts were awarded with the 2017 Walter Payton Man of the Year by the NFL. A no doubt Hall of Famer, Watt has been one of, if not the best player in the NFL for a number of years over the course of the last decade. And we can only hope that whatever this plague of injuries is ends and we get to see a little bit more of him before he does eventually retire. In his 13 seasons, Jason Taylor went to 6 Pro Bowls, was a 3-time All-Pro, and was voted the 2006 Defensive Player of the Year. But what he's probably most known for is creating turnovers, with 8 interceptions, 46 forced fumbles, and an NFL record 29 fumble recoveries. But even when he wasn't getting turnovers, Jason Taylor was creating havoc in other ways. His 87 passes defended are the most by any D lineman in NFL history. He is also the only D lineman to record 3 seasons of 10 or more passes defended. The only other player to have 2 such seasons is J.J. Watt, whom he falls directly behind in career tackles for loss with 151, and that's not including the 2 seasons he played before the stat was recorded. And just as remarkable was Taylor's consistency, missing just 6 games throughout his 13-year career, which included an 8-year span between 2000 to 2007, where he recorded a per-game average of 4.25 forced fumbles, 7.6 passes defended, 64.5 tackles, and 12.6 sacks. All in all, his accomplishments earned him a first-ballot entry into the Hall of Fame in 2017. Like Watt, Taylor was also just as great off the field as he was on the field, where his Jason Taylor Foundation has made a huge difference in the lives of thousands of kids in southern Florida, and also helped earn him the 2017 Walter Payton Man of the Year Award. In his 13 seasons, Warren Sapp went to 7 Pro Bowls, was a 4-time All-Pro, and was voted the 1999 Defensive Player of the Year. His 96.5 sacks make him the 5th all-time among defensive tackles in the category. And while he's just outside the top 20 in tackles for loss with 91, this doesn't take into consideration the 4 years he played before the stat was even recorded. Had he managed to get just 7 such tackles per year in those 4 seasons, which I'm pretty sure he could have managed, and probably did, he would be 2nd all-time in the category. While Sapp's stats may not jump off of the page in the same way his defensive end counterparts might, his impact on the game cannot be ignored. Sapp is widely considered to be the prototype for the 3-technique defensive tackle, the same position that Aaron Donald has been wreaking havoc with over the last few years. And while he is not the first player to play from this position, he was the first one to help open the eyes of coaches, scouting staffs, and GMs to just how impactful this position could be given the right player playing it. Sapp's combination of size and elite athletic ability helped him to wreak havoc on offenses and lead the intimidating Tampa 2 defense and the 2002 Tampa Bay Buccaneers to their first Super Bowl title in Super Bowl 37 over the Oakland Raiders. In 2013, Sapp became a first-ballot Hall of Famer and had his number 99 retired by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, unless you're a diehard NBA fan or just a massive sports nerd like myself, you're probably wondering who in the hell George McCain is, and also how the heck he got to number 2 on this list. Well, for this one, we're going to have to go a few decades into the past. Having already made his mark on the college game, Mr. Basketball would go professional in 1946. In the next 3 years, he would win 2 NBL titles and 1 BAA title before the 2 leagues merged to become the NBA. McCain would play 6 of the first 7 NBA seasons, becoming a 4-time All-Star, a 6-time All-NBA, 3-time scoring champion, 2-time rebound champion, and winning 4 NBA titles with the Minneapolis Lakers, bringing his total title count to 7 in the 9 seasons that he played professional basketball. In his career, George would average 23.1 points per game, 13.4 rebounds, and 2.8 assists. And while assists aside, these stats would even be impressive in today's game, they are even more impressive when you consider the era that he played in. And although the stat would not be recorded for another 20 years after McCain retired, he was known as the best shot blocker the game had ever seen when he retired. But while George's accomplishments and stats throughout his career are impressive, it's nothing compared to the impact that he had on the game of basketball and how it is played even to this day. At 6'10", 250 pounds, McCain may not have stood out in today's NBA, but in the era he played, he was a man among boys. He used his well above average size and aggressive play style to dominate the league, and forced the NBA to introduce a number of new rules. For instance, if you've ever wondered how the key got its name, well, before McCain entered the league, the foul lane was about half the size that it is now, leaving a keyhole type shape on the court, hence the name. However, the thinner foul lane made it easy for McCain to shut down offensive drives towards the net, and even easier for him to take his time driving towards the net for a simple layup over the much shorter competition, forcing the league to widen the foul lane to help mitigate some of these problems. However, even before the NBA widened the foul lane, other teams found a different way to shut down McCain, but this led to a different problem. The strategy was simple: get a lead, and then just don't let McCain touch the ball, because if he doesn't have the ball, he can't beat you. The problem with this strategy was that back then there was no shot clock, which meant that a team could just play keep away with the basketball, passing it around indefinitely, which, while this did keep McCain from scoring, it also meant that the game was completely unwatchable, once even resulting in a 19-18 victory for the Fort Wayne Pistons over McCain's Minneapolis Lakers, which is still to this day the lowest scoring game in NBA history. And so, in an effort to make the game more exciting and to prevent from having to wake fans up in their seats after the game, the shot clock was born. Goaltending was also introduced as a rule in direct response to George McCain's ability. The rule that prevents a player from blocking a ball once it's in a downward arc towards the net or is directly above the net did not exist prior to this because the feat was thought to be impossible before George McCain. And while I didn't take it into consideration to where he came on this list, as it didn't happen in his playing career while wearing the number 99, even after he retired, McCain continued to have an effect on the game of basketball, as he is directly responsible for the three-point line, which was in the ABA and later adopted by the NBA, and is also directly responsible for the existence of the Minnesota Timberwolves. And finally, in 1959, George Mr. Basketball McCain was introduced into the Basketball Hall of Fame as a part of its initial class. Quite frankly, there will not be an easier number one to pick on any of the following lists. And if you are somehow surprised by this selection, then all I can really say is 1. Yes, hockey does exist, and 2. No, Wayne Gretzky is not just some myth your friend who wants you to watch hockey has made up in order to get you to do so. In his 23 seasons, Gretzky was a 15-time All-Star, won 9 Hart Awards, 5 Bing Awards, 5 Pearson Awards, 10 Ross Awards, 2 Conn Smythes, and won 4 Stanley Cups. Much like George McCain was in basketball, Wayne Gretzky was dominant throughout his career in the NHL. However, unlike George McCain, Wayne's dominance was not due to his physical gifts. In fact, he was well below average size for an NHL player, to a point where many thought that he would not ever make it in the NHL, and that even if he did, he wouldn't last very long, especially due to the fact that he wasn't even that much faster than the average skater in the NHL. Instead, what set Gretzky apart was his still to this day unmatched intuition and seeming sixth sense for the game, often outsmarting opponents by knowing where they were going to be and what they were going to do before even they did. It was this talent and his ability to spot weaknesses that made Gretzky immediately successful upon entering the NHL, a league that at the time revolved around making sure that you got the puck to your best player and then letting them do most of the work. But even once defenses adapted to Gretzky's playstyle by covering his teammates and forcing him to shoot the puck a little bit more, he proved that to be an even more dangerous strategy, by showing off his unmatched ability to find a goalie's weakness and put the puck in himself. And, similar to McCain, the league did try to respond by introducing some new rules to mitigate Gretzky's dominance, specifically with the offsetting penalties rule, which would become known as the Gretzky rule, wherein, when two players got penalties at the same time, the game would remain a 5-on-5 instead of going to a 4-on-4. The reason for this was that Gretzky was so dominant, especially when given extra ice, that the Oilers would try to force 4-on-4s in order to give him a better chance to score goals, and they would often be successful. Eventually, however, this rule would be abandoned. Now, like any all-time great player, every fan has their own way of explaining what made Gretzky so good. Who knows, maybe he really did have some sort of supernatural sixth sense that was aiding him. Maybe it was just the era he played in. Or maybe it was because other players were too afraid to hit him because they were scared of Marty McSorley. Or maybe he was just deflating pucks and never got caught. But as far as I'm concerned, his stats speak for themselves. So here are at least a few of his many NHL records. Career regular season goals, assists, and points. Career playoff goals, assists, and points. Total goals, total assists, total points. Single regular season goals, assists, and points. Total single season goals, assists, and points. Single season playoff assists, single season playoff points, single season playoff plus minus. Fastest to 50 goals in a season, fastest to 100 points in a season, career hat tricks, career playoff hat tricks, single season hat tricks, assists in a playoff series, most points in a final series, seasons with 40 plus goals, seasons with 50 plus goals, seasons with 60 plus goals, seasons with 70 plus goals, seasons with 80 plus goals, and the only season with 90 plus goals. Single game assists, which he did 3 times, consecutive games with an assist, and consecutive games with a point. But finally, once all was said and done and Gretzky retired, the NHL decided to forgo the waiting period and immediately inducted Gretzky into the Hockey Hall of Fame, and would later retire his number 99 league-wide. Alright, well, if you've made it this far, thank you for joining me for my list of the greatest players to ever wear the number 99. If you like this video, and if you made it this far, I kind of hope you did, there's a button for that. If you want to see more videos like this in the future, there's also a button for that. And if you have something you need to get off your chest, or you just want to yell at me for not including James Jones on this list, well, you can let me know about that in the comments, and I will try to respond as long as it seems like it's worth it. I don't know. Anyway, thanks for joining me, and we'll see you next time.